All right. The other one that we see is helplessness. And as we go through these, you will see that marginality leads to helplessness, leads to dependency and inferiority and things like that. Now, there's a lot of research that has been done on helplessness, especially learned helplessness. And some of the things that we are seeing in the children that we're working with and going through culture of poverty is that many of these helplessness behaviors that they're going through are actually learned, actually. The studies will describe or define helplessness as this ongoing defeating behavior that leads one to believe that no matter what they do, they will not be able to change their circumstance. Okay. Many of our kids go through this, actually. Many of our kids have been bombarded by so much negativity in their lives that they feel that I will never be able to get out of this. This is my life. And I see this especially among the Hispanic children. And one of the interesting things about our Hispanic children is that they have no real sense of identity of what it means to be Hispanic or anything like that. And so they are bombarded by what they see in their neighborhood, the blatant poverty, the inequality in the schools. I had one child who told me, "Sir, the difference between living in the north side and living where I live at is that if you walk out of your subdivision on the north side, you see all these stores where you can shop. And he says, if you walk out of my neighborhood, out of my subdivision, you don't see any stores where you can shop. You'll probably see the gas station, but you won't see as many stores and restaurants as you can see as soon as you step foot outside of your subdivision on the north side." I myself never paid attention to that, but that was a very, very important point, actually. For many of us, shopping is a relaxation, how we relieve stress, and the idea that you can step outside of your subdivision and you have all of these resources available to you. The dentist is right there. The physician is right there. The pharmacy is right there. The grocery store is right there. Shopping is right there. But when you go into some of these other neighborhoods, they don't have anything like that, actually. And so they are bombarded with all of these messages of, well, perhaps I am worth less than those who have more, and things like that. When we ask children, when I talk to kids, why is it that you're not going to school? Many of our kids come into juvenile detention because they don't go to school. You know, as a condition of their probation, they have to show up for school, not be tardy, not get referrals to the principal, and things like that. But many of them will not go to school. And the common answer they give me is it's boring, sir. It's boring. I really don't need to know those kinds of things. But when you get down to it, they can't compete with their classmates. And they feel so out of place because they can't compete. The embarrassment, the weak ego in them that they can't stand up there and face that, teacher, I don't know this, when they see that their classmates do know more than they do. So one of the biggest things that I see with these children is that they are not able to compete with their own peers, and so they run away. They try to leave the situation that is causing them anxiety. Okay. Feelings of inadequacy are pervasive. The same feelings of inadequacy that we see in the children, we are also seeing in the parents, actually. And one of the interesting things that, sometimes I'll sit in the lobby area or in the visitation area and observe the parents that are coming in to see their children. And it's very interesting to see the type of parents that are coming in. Of course, juvenile detention, we get kids from all over the city. But some of the parents that come in, who themselves have a history of incarcerations and things of that nature, they come into juvenile detention with a lot of confidence, actually. They come in and they know where to go, they know what to do, and things like that. They give up their ID, everything, they just know. And then some of the parents whose children are there for the first time or who come from the more affluent parts of the city, they show genuine shame. I'm so embarrassed. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. And, we talk to them on the phone, and the mothers will tell me, I don't know if I can show up there. I don't know what to do. Please tell my son that I have a doctor's appointment or something like that. But they genuinely feel that, number one, I don't fit in. That's not my place. My son shouldn't belong there. And believe me, they try to do everything they can to get that child out of there. It was really very interesting to see this young man that came out of the Elotes area, a very affluent family. And we knew that he was affluent because he had his own personal attorney sitting next to him the whole night long there at orientation. And that attorney did a very good job. He did not leave until pretty much they told him, you have to leave. It's time to put this boy to bed. But the very next morning, as soon as it was open, that attorney was there. And these children see these things. The children that don't have the resource of a private attorney, they see these things and they begin to ostracize this particular young man. He does not fit in with us. And in this, the living areas are called mods. And each mod has 12 cells. And so the next thing you hear is that we need to move that young man, that affluent young man, out of there because the whole mod is trying to attack him. Why? Because he doesn't fit in. He's not one of us, sir. And it's this culture of fitting in that is so predominant there at Juvenile Detention Center that it's very, very difficult to break also. So inadequacy are pervasive. You see it in the child, you're going to see it in the parent as well. Now this is another big one right here, fatalism. This is my life, sir. I'm sure you already know that many of our children involved in gangs do not perceive themselves as living beyond the age of 18. As if 18 is that magical number where you now become an adult, and well, it's not romantic to become an adult. It's much more romantic to say that I live this lifestyle, this was the lifestyle that was given to me, and I died doing what I lived for, and things like that. They have a strong sense of fatalism. Sir, whatever happens, happens. Okay? One of the things that we see with many of our kids too is that as they are approaching the age of 18, they engage in higher risks in behaviors that are much more riskier, much more as if playing with life and death and things of that nature. Almost as if to say, whatever happens, happens, sir. Okay? They don't have a strong connection with their families, which allows them to feel this way as well. Whatever happens, happens, sir. One of the things that we talk about when I meet with these children is we talk about love. You know, is there someone that you love? And does someone love you? But they are so filled with doubt as to what love really is, and does somebody really love me? They really don't understand that concept very much. And I'll touch on that a little bit more as well. Dependency. San Antonio has a huge problem with dependency. Huge, amazingly huge. And I began to see this as a social worker quite soon, actually. And you know, leaving social work school, you want to feed the hungry and shelter the poor and advocate for social justice and things like that. But then you begin to see that no matter how much work you do for them and how much you tell them that they can do it, some of them really don't want to. It's a lot easier to wait for that check to come here and things like that. It's a lot easier to wait for somebody to rescue me than for me to put forth the energy to do my part. A lot of that exists in San Antonio, actually. And one of the things that I talk about a lot, and some of my friends who are politicians and big advocates, we get into this little discussion because I tell them, you know, by now the west side or the south side would be one of the best places to live in San Antonio, because every politician that comes through there says, we're going to do this for you, and we're going to do all this, and we're going to do all that. And it continues to be the same place that it was 50 years ago, pretty much. Actually, 50 years ago, it was a lot better place to live. But we begin to see that some of these families have gotten so used to waiting for the next opportunity when another social worker will come in and will provide me with what I need. This fresh-faced young social worker, fresh out of social work school, willing to provide me with free food, free clothing, and everything. So it's almost as if they know when the next graduating class is from the social work school. Social worker, I need help. But so those are, you know, I'm being a little bit silly, but those are some of the behaviors that I began to see. When I pick up the phone and I call the family and I let them know, we have your son here at Juvenile Detention Center, here's my number, where you can call me if you have any questions. They begin to quickly give me a laundry list of everything that their child needs. My child has mental problems and he needs his medication. He hasn't had a psychiatric evaluation, and it's the fact that he's not on his medication that he's getting into trouble. And I tell him, Señora, if you knew that your child had a mental problem, and if you knew that your child was having these problems, why didn't you take him to the doctor? Well, and they come up with another excuse, and another excuse, and another excuse. That's dependency. That's dependency. They wait for the next opportunity when somebody else can follow through with what needs to be done. One of the things that we see a lot of is life owes me. Life owes me, sir. I'm growing up poor, okay? And things like that. Life owes me. But this is different. This life owes me is different when we compare, for example, immigrant families coming in. When we are able to look at immigrant families coming in and Hispanic American families that have already lived here, we begin to see a completely different train of thought here. The Hispanic American families here have a lot of life owes me from the civil rights movement kinds of things. They bring up all of these things. Sir, my mother told me that back then somewhere along the road we were oppressed and they didn't let us do these things, so the white man owes me kind of thing. But this is different when we look at immigrant families coming in and their children. They come with a completely different attitude. This is the land of opportunity. If I work hard, I can make it. Completely different mindset. Okay. Opportunism. Now this is one of the biggest things that we see here. There was this young boy who was being released from Juvenile Detention Center. And as he's being walked out, he sees a pair of tennis shoes. And he picks them up. And immediately he's rearrested and locked in Juvenile Detention Center for stealing tennis shoes. Very, very opportunistic. We see a lot of people who are, for example, the other day, one of the nurses at Juvenile Detention Center was telling me, I parked in the director's parking spot because he's on vacation, and I cracked the window a little bit so that my car wouldn't be so hot. And the next thing I know, I'm getting a call from somebody who is breaking into my car and stealing my little GPS tracker and my CDs and things like that. And this was in broad daylight, right in front of juvenile detention, where there's guards out there. And that's opportunism. They're going to look for the quickest and easiest opportunity to gain whatever they can from it, which, again, fits in with why some families are able to just hunker down and sit there and wait for the next social worker to pass through. Okay? It's this opportunism and life owes me that keeps them from taking a greater charge of their life. Minimal effort to attain greater gains. Okay. Again, we see the same thing. What do you mean, sir, that I have to work for my own well-being and things like that? When I worked in the schools, for example, and there's a lot of great people in San Antonio that donate a lot of money to help children living in poverty. But one of the things that I would do in working with families is that the family would come in saying, I need school supplies and things of that nature. And I would ask the family, Señora, I speak to a lot of women, it's feminization of poverty, I suppose. So, most of my work is in Spanish as well. But Señora, you knew that school was going to begin. Why didn't you save a little here and a little there to buy the crayons, to buy the pencils, and things like that? I said, look, 25 cents at Walgreens, 50 cents at so-and-so, and things like that. I said, well, I heard that I can get free school supplies here. I said, well, yes, that's true, but you have to do your part as well. And so I would tell them, I will buy you the backpack. It's up to you to fill it up. Fill it up with the tools that your child needs to become a great student and escape out of the poverty that you guys are living in, kinds of things. One of the things that I've learned to do as well as a social worker after 15 years is that I've pretty much stopped being politically correct. I found that the direct approach works very well, actually. And I suppose that speaking in Spanish, we have all these symbols and things that we use to communicate with each other, and it flows much easier, and they get the message quite easily. But minimal efforts to attain greater gains. We see a lot of this as well. I think it's in here where one of the times I was talking to some friends of mine, and we talked about how affirmative action goes bad, when affirmative action goes wrong. And it creates a huge debate among some of my social work friends who are big-time advocates for affirmative action. But some of the things that I've been seeing as far as when affirmative action goes wrong is that the idea behind affirmative action was to make the playing field equal, not to make it more unequal. And one of the things that I began to see in the schools, for example, was in the field of bilingual education. Okay? Bilingual education requires a lot of resources still. And I began to see that when children were being registered into the school and they were coming from impoverished communities and things of that nature, already they were being categorized as perhaps not very bright. Already, let's put them in these particular programs because you're going to need a lot more help to do all these things and things of that nature. I also began to see that affirmative action was not making them stronger, but making them weaker. Why? Because the standards were being lowered. The standards were being lowered. Why? Because this child does not know any English, so let's lower the standards so that he can pass and not feel bad about failing. All of a sudden, I began to hear these things such as, you can't give the child a failing grade because you're going to traumatize them. And I began to ask myself, I've never read any such study that says that an F will traumatize a child. Okay? But there's these ideas that if a child is coming from a particular ethnic group or a particular socioeconomic status, then we have to lower the standards so that the child doesn't feel bad. But what we're doing is we're setting up the child for greater failure. If the child continues to believe that he's doing really good, and when he gets to high school or even university and they can't compete, they're going to look back and they're going to say, I've been cheated. All this time I've been cheated. And we see this a lot at UTSA, believe it or not. UTSA prides itself on recruiting many Hispanics, but they don't talk about the high number of students that drop out. Many of them come to the counseling centers and say, sir, I used to be a straight A student at my school. They told me that I was smart, but why am I getting such poor grades here? And then you begin to explore a little bit more what school they went through, what programs they were involved in. And they said, see, mijo, what happens when you're not told the truth? See what happens when you're told to not work as hard because you don't have to? See what happens when you take the easy route to graduate? And things like that. So this is where I feel that it contributes more to not fitting in and not having the ability to compete at the same level as everybody else. And so when I talk about affirmative action going wrong, this is the example that I use. Affirmative action is not meant to lower standards, or at least it shouldn't be lowering the standard. When we're working with our kids, the idea is not to lower the standard, but make the objectives much more reachable. One of the things that we've seen in children who are helpless is that if they feel that the goal is too far away to reach, they're not going to work there. If they feel that they don't have the power to accomplish that goal, they're not going to get there. We did an amazing thing at juvenile detention in our security mod. Security is where the child is punished for not following the rules, and they stay in a cell pretty much the whole day. Now, the old way is that they would stay there for 7 days. Until we began to see improved behavior. But children are children, teenagers are teenagers. They don't have the patience to sit there for 7 days, 20 hours or 10 hours, whatever it may be. And they're going, by their very nature, they're going to want to get out. So one of the things that we changed at juvenile detention was that instead of 7 days, it's going to be 2 days. But you have to follow a program. During the day, you get to come out of yourself, but you have to participate in a therapeutic assignment, participate in groups, do a goals group, and a whole bunch of other things. And when these kids were able to see that these goals are a lot easier to reach because every hour I can actually get a check mark for accomplishing a goal, we saw improved behavior, way improved behavior. And they were able to get out of security and go back to the regular mod and be much more comfortable. So, a huge light bulb turned on for all of us there. Let's not lower the standard, but let's make the objectives much smaller and much more reachable. And the same thing is what we can do with our kids at the schools, in the communities, in any place. When I talked to the probation officers on this very issue, they also began to do the same thing. Let's break down the conditions of probation to much more reachable goals and things like that. Not lower the standard, just make the objectives much more reachable. And we began to see improvement in behavior and improvement in self-esteem. Because now the child was able to say, I worked for this and I actually got something in return. Studies have shown that when helplessness begins to ensue is when somebody is working hard for something and nothing good happens because of it. We've also seen that there was a study done with children with playing marbles. And they were told that here's a stack of free marbles and here are the marbles that you have to work for. Many children prefer to work for the marbles than to just get free marbles, actually, which was very, very interesting. Children like working toward goals. At Juvenile Detention Center, everybody volunteers to sweep the mod, to wipe down the tables and things like that.